Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and I'm super pumped to have Jason Balara on the episode today. He is a veterinary surgeon, lives out in LA, and we dig into a lot of different aspects of house hacking and what that means and how to get started in real estate, or how he got started in real estate that way. How he thought about doing long distance investing before he really settled on syndication. We talked about how he got his first deal in June of 2021 and now has built up a nice portfolio in Atlanta and has really narrowed his search to one location before going out and trying to find another location. It's a great episode, talks about his why and why he started investing and what keeps him motivated and what keeps him going. So let's jump right into the episode and get Jason on the line.
Do you love your job, but want other investment options than your company's 401k and trying to pick stocks? If so, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, you will get actionable information for your passive real estate investment journey. Welcome back to another episode of Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon.
Awesome, Jason. Welcome to the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. I'm really excited to have you on. So, give me a little bit of an overview of who you are and how you got into real estate.
Yeah, I will. Justin, thanks for having me. So I guess as background, I am a veterinary surgeon by trade. That's kind of my day job. Sort of long story short, apparently I've always been a real estate investor, or I have been for a long time. It was just, I didn't realize I was investing. I was wanted to own. And so I was buying a house that was terrible, needed a lot of work, just sort of what I could afford. Yeah. And I would have roommates and I would do the work myself. And so I was house hacking 20 years ago.
Before it was a term.
Years ago, right. Before it was called house hacking. I was live-in flips, all of that stuff. I understood that I could force appreciation in real estate by, sort of fixing things. And the reality is when I started that process, all I knew was I wanted to do it. I didn't know how. So I spent a good number of years figuring that out, both on my own, but I actually went ahead and started working for contractors. So I worked a fair bit in construction, kind of throughout my life, starting even as a teenager. And then the way that sort of translated to real estate investing was, again, initially in just our own lives, right? The houses we lived in, buying something that was just needed work because I knew, okay, I could get that for less. And now I can even once I started to make some money as a surgeon, I still wouldn't buy like a nice house. I just couldn't do it. I had a mental block. And I said, I would say to my wife, we can buy this house for half as much money, make it just as nice and not spend as much money on it in the long run. So it was something that I still enjoy. I really like the idea of, kind of flipping houses. However, it takes a lot of time. And so my kids, I had my first son when I was, or 4 years ago, he just turned 4. So when that happened, I had a bit of a shift in that I worked a lot as a veterinary surgeon. I worked a lot as on our own house and fixing it up, doing a lot of the work myself. I was just very much in that sort of DIY mindset in all aspects of life. And then had my son and I was like, I really don't like being away from this. And it became a bit of a mission to figure out a way to be around the family more. And it was very apparent that the only way I make money as a surgeon is doing surgery. And right. So it's, I can't do that from home. So I started to look more seriously into real estate investing. This was in the beginning of 2020.
Okay.
Initially, my thought process was, I live in Los Angeles. I probably wasn't going to be able to really cash flow any sort of rentals here. It's possible. You never say never, but I don't like to sort of dismiss things, but it's not as easy to do it here. And so I started to look at, long distance investing. And actually what inspired me to that was David Green's book on long distance real estate investing. I kind of read that one, I think 3 times through and was like, okay, I can do this. I'd never thought about it being away from me because I had that sort of DIY component to myself. I still do. It's hard to kind of get it out of me. So I started looking at residential properties that I was going to BRRRR long distance. So I was going to look in Atlanta because I had a friend who had moved there and become a residential realtor. Worked through that process for a couple months, and ultimately I started doing more and more research, podcasts, books, kind of whatever I could get a hold of. And I ran into syndication. I didn't know what it was before that. So I ran into syndication. I heard a podcast on it and was like, this sounds very interesting. Let me look more. And so I did a lot of, kind of research, education on that specific topic. And I really realized the benefits of scale. If you're doing single family houses, it's probably going to take you a long time to get 100 houses, 50 houses, whatever you want to say, like some number of houses kind of in your portfolio. Whereas you can go out and buy one single apartment complex and it might have 50, 100, 400, units in it. So with one transaction, you can sort of jump right up that ladder. Now, in terms of ownership, it's not likely that you're going to own, have as much of an ownership in a syndication as you would in individual properties. But in reality, over time, a smaller piece of a bigger pie was kind of the thinking at that point.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, that was 2020. Once I realized that's what I wanted to do, I really dove all in. I did a mentorship with Ellie Perlman. That was kind of my real start. And I just gradually started, kind of doing all the things you're supposed to do, reaching out to brokers, networking. And it was very slow in the beginning. It's hard to get the attention that you need, both from, sort of the brokers and also investors right off the bat. And so it just takes a lot of work. And then you kind of get to that point where you find a deal. And so I got my first deal under contract as a lead sponsor in June of 2021. Prior to that, I did some things within real estate investing to just make use of the capital that I had. I did some private money lending. I actually got involved in a joint venture self-storage deal. So I didn't like the idea of just sitting around and waiting, because it did take, a good chunk of time before I found that deal that worked and was able to get it under contract. And so I just didn't like the idea of doing nothing. Once I decided this was what I wanted to do, I didn't want to just sit back. So kind of got in there, and that was kind of the start. And I guess I'll stop there, Justin. I don't want to ramble on forever, but
I was jotting down notes because there's a couple things I want to kind of peel back the onion on that I think are really interesting from a few perspectives. But so you kind of have this full-time job, like that's your life, your passion. And, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are in a similar position where they have a job that they love, they make good money. They don't necessarily want to quit their job to pursue real estate full time. Maybe they have some money and they want to become a little bit more involved in real estate investing. And you talked about a couple things. House hacking is, kind of the, way to buy a single family house and have roommates, and you kind of live there, maybe rent free, because they're going to essentially pay the mortgage. That's something that, a lot of people do, especially early on in their lives. That's, an easy kind of way to kind of get entry point into real estate investing. It doesn't feel like you're investing, but you really are, because they're essentially paying your mortgage, so to speak. So, and then you thought about doing the BRRRR method. I had somebody on the podcast the other day, and we talked a little about the BRRRR method. And I think it's buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. I think that's the R's. So, but you want to do it long distance, and that's always kind of like a unique challenge, just because you can't physically go there, and especially with your kind of DIY mindset. Did you actually end up doing a BRRRR, or did you kind of think about that and then you fell into the syndication? And then I want to talk a little about kind of some of your initial passive stuff as well.
Yeah, I didn't actually end up purchasing one. I got so far as to had a realtor looking for deals, sending me deals. I was doing underwriting. I was looking at some of them pretty seriously, but yeah, never actually did it, kind of on that single family side. And it's the long distance investing for me, probably, to be frank, is a good thing because of my DIY. Like if it was right,
it almost
here,
saves you from yourself.
Yes, that's exactly what it does. It saves me from myself. It keeps me from being like, oh, I want these units renovated faster. I'm just gonna go do it myself. It's not the best use of my time, right? It's like okay, I can do it, but it's not the best use of my time. It's really probably not the best use of anyone's time. Well, that's not true. Depends on what stage you are, right? It depends on where you're at in your investing journey. In the beginning, DIY might be really good. And I did a lot of that. I did that for a lot of years. So I don't want to say that's not the best use of everybody's time. But right now, for me, I can make a lot more money by either doing surgery or investing at that higher level, sort of doing CEO activities.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I want to take a quick sponsor break right here. But before we go, I'm going to be asking him a little bit more about his passive investing start. So stick around after the break. We'll be right back.
Whether you're in a job you love or hate, building a financial foundation is important. This foundation can support you by providing passive income, stability in an uncertain economy, or the launching pad for you to start your own business. Great Venture Capital helps busy professionals invest in commercial real estate to build passive income streams, grow wealth, and take advantage of tax benefits. If you'd like to learn more, check us out at greatventurecapital.com or send an email to justin@greatventurecapital.com.
All right, welcome back to the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Got Jason on here. And before we went to the break, I talked a little about, I wanted to ask him a little bit about his initial passive investing journey. And you talked about kind of doing, you made a lot of money and can make a lot of money doing surgery, right? And so you didn't want to just sit on the sidelines as you started to look for these multifamily syndication deals. So you were taking a little bit more of an active role in looking for deals. Talk about some of the first initial investments that you did kind of quote unquote passively. You mentioned some hard money lending, and then, talk a little about that. How do you get started?
Yeah. The very first thing I did from a passive standpoint is I actually invested as an LP in a syndication with my mentor. So that was probably 6 months, maybe 5-6 months into the mentorship program. They had a deal offering, and I just started thinking about it. I was like, well, here I am doing a mentorship. Why wouldn't I want to invest with her? Obviously, I believe in what she's teaching, how she does business. Right. So I went ahead and invested there. It's been very successful. It's been a great investment. And then as I was doing sort of that networking and things, I met some people doing flips, and they actually brought it up. Do you ever consider doing private money lending? And I was like, I guess I hadn't considered it, but sure, tell me what you need. Yeah. And it was all of those things are really easy processes. So if someone has money and they just want to be a passive investor, it's really easy to do that. It's just, you got to find, who you want to invest with and everything. So that it's not completely without its, due diligence processes and things like that. But in reality, if you're invested passively, you literally give them money and collect a check every month or every quarter or whatever it ends up being. So I did that. We invested as an LP, invested in two of the private money lending, house flipper type deals, and then you're really just, again, collecting interest on your money, much higher interest rate than you're going to get in the bank.
Right. I'm curious how the process worked with the private money lending, because I've looked into it a little bit, but I'm just kind of curious kind of how you structured it. And you don't have to give me the nitty gritty, but just kind of, how long was the loan? Because obviously you could be earning, 8, 9, 10, 12%, but then you have that money dormant for a period after the loan comes due, right? So maybe just give me a high level of that.
Yeah, and during the whole time, I'd imagine you can structure it kind of however you want, right? If you're lending and someone needs it bad enough, you can dictate the terms. But again, for me, it was a bit of a learning process, and I knew that they did this with other people, and so they sort of said, here's the contract that we typically do.
Oh, got it.
I showed it to my attorney, looked good. Essentially, it was an interest-only loan during the hold time. Like I said, there were two of them. Within the contract, it basically said, not to be held more than a year. One of them, we were in and out in 6 or 7 months. So once they either sell or refinance, you get your initial capital back. Yep. The second one actually went longer than a year. So we had to kind of have that discussion. It wasn't a problem necessarily on my end, but it did take, I think, maybe 14 months instead of a year for them to get, completely done and get it into a situation that they felt was, the right return. So, but yeah, basically at the end of it, you just get your initial capital back.
And so for the guests that may not have heard it, I was on your podcast a while ago, Know Your Why podcast. So I'm kind of curious, what is your why, and like, why did you get, obviously you had this kind of bug to kind of start real estate investing. You just kind of tried a few different things. And I guess why did you get into it, and why did you stay with it?
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, I've noticed this with my guests, but the why tends to evolve, right? So if you'd asked me why I started a podcast and named it that, it's my family. It's my kids were born, like I said, and all of a sudden it was like I realized I wasn't home a lot, and my wife was very tolerant of that. She worked a lot as well, but once the kids came, it was like, I wanted to be around. I want to help. I want them to remember me. This may be a little bit morbid, but like I'm 48, so I'm, I guess, old for a dad with young kids. But I do think about, okay, how long do I actually have with them, right? Like, am I going to walk my daughter down the aisle, right? Those are legitimate thoughts that I have, where like, if you have a kid in your 20s, you probably don't, not that things don't happen, but like, you might not think about that as seriously as you are. And so I'm very, very conscious of time, both what we have and the value of it. So, when the kids were born, my concept of what was the most valuable thing changed a lot, and it changed like strongly. All of a sudden it was like time is all I care about at this point. And so, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but in terms of the why, that was it. It was spending time with family. However, what I realized and why I stick with real estate is these are tremendously good opportunities that most people don't know about, right? Like, they don't teach about this in school. They don't teach it in high school. They don't teach it in college. They didn't teach me in medical school. Like, nobody ever told me how to run a business or manage my money, even at the basic level, let alone invest in real estate. I just liked construction and happened to be a poor kid that grew up around, like, someone put a hammer in my hand. I'm like, oh, I guess this is how I'll make some money. And so I find in my career as a veterinarian, nobody knows about it there either, right? And so now part of my why is my why is bigger than just my family. It's still family, first and foremost, but now it's a matter of the impact I can have on the veterinary community. I legitimately want to change the industry. And I think a lot of that will come from being able to provide financial freedom and education to other veterinarians. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but veterinarians have the highest suicide rate of all professions. Wow, and so a lot of that is due to financial strain. So a lot of these people come out with tremendously high student debt, things like that, and don't make a sort of proportionate amount of money for it, right? So it's just, the reason to stick with it is it is a good investment vehicle, and also provides me the opportunity to be at home with my family, and again now have an impact on the veterinary community and beyond that in the long run.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I created this podcast and titled it the way that I did, is because, I grew up in a small, rural, lower middle class family, and the financial advice I got was, work for a really good company, work for 30 to 40 years, invest in your 401k, hope you have enough to retire, right? That was kind of the thesis that everybody kind of goes off of. And, I had a mindset shift in mid 2018 where I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and was like, what the heck am I doing with my time and my money? And, I took a bit of a different route. I ended up, quitting a very stable job to devote more of my time to real estate investing and being a little bit more active. And, I started a recruiting business, right? So, I'm trying to help people that are in a position where they love their job, or maybe they hate their job, but they make good money and they just want other options that they just haven't been made aware of. And hopefully they find the podcast and they can, invest in deals that I have or you have, or anybody that kind of comes on. It's more about just getting the education out there so people are aware. So,
absolutely.
I'm kind of curious a little bit about, putting yourself in a W-2 mindset, because you are, I don't know if you have your own practice or if you are part of a practice, but you are kind of a full-time employee, so to speak, I guess. If you're somebody that's sitting in an office and you've listened to this on your drive to work, what's a good first step for somebody that if they want to start their passive investing journey, how would they get started? Obviously, they're listening to the podcast, so they're getting a little bit of knowledge, but like, what's a good first kind of step?
Yeah, I mean, getting started as a passive investor is all about education. And I think that's maybe a little cliche to say, but it's really true. I think you need to know something, right? You don't want to just hand over to your money to the first person that puts up a cool Instagram post or something like that, right? Yeah. You really want to know what's happening with it. And so the challenge is not only that most people don't know about this stuff, but at a basic level, there are sort of two types of syndications that people can invest in, right? There's the 506B and 506C. Within a 506B, you have to know someone. So if you are not accredited, right? So maybe you've talked about what accredited means on the show before this, but
happy to reiterate.
Yeah, but basically, you have, if you're a single person, you make $200,000 a year or more, and you have for 2 years and have a reasonable expectation to continue that. If you're a married couple, the 300,000 is the number. You also can have $1 million net worth, but it can't include your primary residence. Right. There's a bunch of other little nuances to it too, but those are the ones that most people look at. And so if you have a 506B offering as a sponsor, or flip side is being, wanting to be the passive investor, you have to have a pre-existing relationship with that person, whether they're accredited or not accredited. The flip side of that is those 506C offerings, you can advertise those and you don't have to have a pre-existing relationship. However, everybody has to be accredited. So there are some, what I think, misguided regulations in place, in the sense that it sort of blocks people. It sort of blocks the people you would really want to help from getting into these opportunities. Yep. I think it's a very, like I said, misguided. It's an SEC regulation. We can't do anything about it, but it's misguided by the SEC because it's like a perfect example, right? We had the whole GameStop fiasco, right? And people put a bunch of money into stocks and GameStop because someone on Reddit said they should. And people lost a lot of money there, and nobody stops that from happening. However, if those same people, and they're not accredited, wanted to invest in a real estate syndication, which is much safer, they can't do it, or they have to find someone that, they have to do the work to know someone that has one to offer. And so it just doesn't make sense that in one asset class, people are freely allowed to blow all their money, like crypto, you can do whatever you want. But in real estate, there's all these regulations as to why, who can be a part of the offering. So it is disappointing to me that I can have my mom invest in a deal, but no one else could, right? She doesn't know any other syndicators. So it's kind of just the people that need the help growing their wealth they have the least access to it. And I think that's a really unfortunate way to structure the regulations.
Yeah. And I think, just having money doesn't necessarily mean you're a savvy investor, right? It just, my guess is their model is, okay, well, you make enough money that if you lose $50,000, $100,000, it's not going to ruin your lives. But that's not necessarily the case. I've hired and placed a lot of people that make, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, but they're terrible with their money. So, if they, even though they just spend it, right? So, it is a frustrating rule. I guess one of the things I'm curious about kind of on that is, how do you, if you're like, okay, I really want to, start to learn about, investing and, want to get into a syndication, what are some of the things that you think somebody should ask a syndicator, to start to build that know, like, and trust model? Because obviously, a lot of the syndications that I do and, that I've invested in, the minimums are typically $50,000. Some of them are 75 or 100, right? So it's not, an insignificant amount of money. And so, you want to be able to, if, you found your own deals, right? So that's a little bit easier story to tell, where you're like, okay, here's my underwriting, here's how I did it. But you may be raising money for somebody else's deal. So, not only am I, as a passive investor, betting on you, I'm also betting on the fact that the person that found the deal, right? So how do you kind of,
Right.
unpack that or unpeel that onion essentially?
Yeah. You have to establish what is comfortable for you, right? So some people would likely only want to invest with, as far as a passive investor, they'd only want to invest with people they know personally. And in some cases you have to do that, right? Like that, we just talked about it. But suppose you knew someone personally, but they aren't going to be the operator of that deal. As you mentioned, the example of, sort of someone raising capital for someone else. Personally, I probably wouldn't invest in that deal. And that's a big part of why I want to be not just a capital raiser, but I want to be an operator. Because if I'm going to raise capital from friends, family, whoever is in my network, I need to have some level of control there, or it needs to be someone that I know very well and trust them very highly. And it's just a small list, right?
Yeah.
It's, and I think that's, if you're going to be a passive investor, that's what you have to do is you have to go develop that small list. And that can be via referrals. That's a really good way to do it. Just going out and the sponsor, they talk a lot about track record. That's always one of the things that gets brought up. You need to look at the sponsor's track record. I think there are plenty of good sponsors that don't have as big of a track record as maybe someone who has been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
And there are different motivations when you are starting out than when you have a company and you've been doing it for a long, long time, in terms of what you as the sponsor are trying to get out of the deals. So we should always put investors first. That should always be, but I'm not sure that it always happens that way.
Yeah. And I'm in the mindset. So I'm actively looking for deals, but I also raise money for a small handful of people that I know, like, and trust. And every deal that I've raised for till this point, we're recording this in February of 23, I've invested alongside of my investors, except for one. And the only reason I did that was because I bought my own house. I bought a family residence and I didn't have the cash flow to do it at that moment. But I'm much more concerned about losing other people's money, whether they're friends or family, or I met them at a conference and we built that relationship, way more than I am worried about losing my own money. Obviously, I don't want to lose my own money at all, but I'm more worried about bringing a deal to a friend or a family member, and them being, comfortable with putting their money with me. But I'm like, you're not putting your money with me. I'm the conduit of kind of the deal. But I know, like, and trust the person I'm investing with in this deal. Here's why. And if you want to do that, great. But yeah, it's much more of a stressful thing for me to put other people's money into deals because, like I said, I don't have as much control as an operator does, but I'm putting my money and my investors' money with an operator that I know, like, and trust, and have maybe done other deals with. Because that's the other thing I've done. I've invested passively with operators to get a sense of how they operate and how, like, they structure their deals and how they underwrite the deals before I bring a deal to my investors from a capital raising perspective. So I totally get the control piece. So we are in kind of this unique time of the year, or of this year, in the sense of, high interest rates. A lot of people, if you bought deals in the last year or two, you probably didn't underwrite an increase in interest rates, especially if you're on variable rate debt. So I'm kind of curious, maybe talk a little about what your outlook is. Are you still a buyer in this kind of environment? And if so, kind of maybe what are some of the markets that you really are attracted to?
Yeah, the easy question, I guess, to answer first is the markets. I invest in Atlanta. So far, I invest as a lead sponsor. I invest in Atlanta and exclusively. A big part of that is that whole control piece, right? I want to have everything fully dialed in there before I sort of do that and then build a team in another market.
Yep.
And I think I'm just about there. So I think, although there's plenty of opportunity in Atlanta, I think I'm not too far from being at the point where I would feel like, okay, Atlanta's good. We'll keep looking for properties there. Let's add in something else. And so the next market I'm interested in is Houston. There's a couple of reasons for me there. I used to live there.
Okay.
I have a lot of people I know there. Some of them are builders. I'm in another mentorship now that with Bar Down Investments, Ashley Wilson and Jay Scott, and they invest in Houston. So I have a number of, I guess, competitive advantages that make Houston a good next market. I also just think it's a great market.
Yeah.
And then finally, I'm starting to look around LA.
Interesting.
Different size deals. I'm thinking more, smaller deals here in LA that would be more of a sort of long-term legacy type hold, something that, go to my kids. But the reality is that the cap rates got so low everywhere else that it isn't actually that far off from LA. And you have a really high opportunity for appreciation here. So my thought process now with something in LA is if I could buy something here and at least break even in 10 years, 20 years, when my kids have it, like they'll be set. They can keep collecting rent, or they can sell it for 3 times as much as I bought it for. Like there's a lot of opportunity in that space. So I'm starting to entertain that idea. In terms of what do I think is going to happen this year? Am I still a buyer? Yes, I absolutely would be happy to buy the right deal. I think a year ago, 2 years ago, when people were talking about conservative underwriting, they didn't mean what they mean now. Conservative underwriting was probably a loose term.
It's the most overused term in the multifamily real estate syndication, jargon. Right. It's like, this is a very conservative underwriting. Trust me, very conservative.
No matter what you see here, it's conservative. So it's just kind of, but now I think people are truly doing that, and I think there's this weird battle going on between, like, sellers don't want to sell for less than they could have a year ago, but buyers certainly aren't going to buy at the prices they would a year ago. You just can't, because the interest rates have gone up so much. So I don't claim to know where it's all going to shake out. I frankly don't care what the interest rate is. That doesn't matter. That's one metric in a whole slew of metrics in your underwriting. So it doesn't really matter to me what the ultimate interest rate is if the returns work for the investors. And maybe as investors, we have to look at lower returns. That may be the, sort of the middle ground where we start. So I think that's getting figured out. I think it's, some people are figuring out, some people are finding some of the deals that where the sellers are coming down enough to make it work. Loan assumptions are a really big deal right now, because people that have longer term debt that they were able to lock in at a lower rate, that's very attractive right now. So there's still ways to do it. There's still ways to buy deals, and it's always a good time to buy real estate if you do it right. I think variable rates are tough right now because you don't know what's going to happen. You need to have a rate cap. The rate cap prices are way more than they were, a year ago.
Right.
It's just finding, you have to be very, very smart about your debt and your basically your whole capital stack, like debt, equity. Maybe you're going to have a lower LTV because the returns to the investors that, like, if you're doing a preferred return, that might actually be lower than the interest rate. So at that point, the preferred equity is sort of cheaper, at least along the way. So I think the days of trying to max out your leverage on a property are probably behind us, at least for a little while. I'm sure at some point the market will get hot again and everybody will be like, yes, I want an 85% LTV. Like it's just going to keep doing that, but you do it to be competitive and to be able to continue deals. So it's looking at the whole picture, right? You need to know what sort of everything is that's going into your underwriting, not just the interest rate.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that I think I'm in a similar mindset around looking at smaller deals that, 10, 20, 30, 40 units, not maybe 100 plus, that are more, I buy like with a couple of partners and we just JV the deals, right? As opposed to doing a traditional syndication. And then those are just like buy and holds for, 10, 20, 30 years, right? I think Houston's interesting. So I live in Austin, Texas, and I've got friends that live in Houston. Houston is definitely a polarizing market. I feel like some people love it and some people hate it. Insurance
That's part of why I like it.
Yeah, if you
because not everybody loves it.
No, it's one of those things like the group that I'm in. We found a deal in Houston, and it was harder to raise capital than it was in other parts of the country, just because it's susceptible to flooding and hurricanes and all that stuff. And insurance rates have gone through the roof there in the last 12 months. But I think in Houston, there's definitely pockets that are definitely interesting. I have that family there, so I'm never opposed to a Houston opportunity. But that's interesting. All right, well, let's kind of transition to the kind of final phase here, Jason. So I've got a 3-pack of questions that I ask everybody. So let's start off with the first one. So what's one piece of advice that you got that got you either started or helped you along your real estate investing journey?
Don't quit. I think it's not a matter of if it gets hard or if you run into problems. You will, and you have to kind of almost embrace that. Realize that there's going to be hard spots. There's going to be, especially, I think one of the reasons why people find like flipping houses or wholesaling or single family residential type deals appealing is because you can do them a lot faster, right? So you have win-win, you like things are stacked, you have wins stacked up. Whereas if you're a multifamily syndicator, you might do, especially if you're doing large deals, you might do 1-2 deals in a year, 4 if it's really awesome. You know what I mean? Like so the fact that most of it is grind
there's a lot of work that goes into that one deal, because you looked at probably 50 to 100 previously, right?
So I think that's the thing is in real estate overall, if you find what works for you, whether you're a passive investor or an active investor, you have to figure out what your investment thesis is. What do you want out of it? And then find the investment vehicle that fits that. It goes to, cash flow, appreciation, tax benefit. Like, what are you looking out of it? Active, passive, markets. There's so many different factors. So you have to define that for yourself. And then, just don't give up when it gets hard.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I actually had somebody that said a very similar sentiment the other day. So it makes sense. All right, what's your favorite business or real estate book that you're into right now?
Well, I already told you that it was really David Green's Long Distance Investing book that gave me even the thought that I could do it away from myself. So I actually, although I'm not doing, residential, it had a big impact on me. I would say the other one, much more recently, is Who Not How. Okay. I think that as that person, as I said, that has that really DIY mindset, Who Not How was kind of earth-shattering for me. Just like, oh yeah, I can have people do that. Like, it just like
that.
Yeah, it's just, I don't have to try and figure out how to be good at every piece of this. Like, I can find people that are good at things already, that can take the parts that and just play to your strengths. Like I said, it's been really, I'm not perfect at it, but it has shifted my mindset on that a lot.
Awesome. And last question here. So if you hit your financial freedom number, meaning you could live an amazing life just off of the passive income you get from real estate, what would you do?
I mean, I'd still work because I like work, but it would be focused around traveling,
work travel. So doing surgeries in the Bahamas, or
I could do that. I mean, that actually is a thing. Like, you can, not necessarily to other countries, but you can be, you can do you actually can go to other countries. You get a temporary visa. So I could do that a bit based around surgery, but more the real estate side of things. Not that I would stop doing surgery, but I wouldn't have to, if I don't have to do it to pay the bills. Like, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy teaching residents and things like that. So it would be still work, but it would be based around travel, in the sense that we would go the places we wanted to go when we wanted to go. I think that's it. That to show, I didn't get on a plane until I was like 24, 25 ever. My kids have been on, not a lot, but have been on a number of times at young ages. And I just think, I like the idea of just being able to get them places, see things that I still haven't seen. Right. So, just sharing those experiences. I'm very much about experiences. I don't care about stuff. I care about it, like, travel. I love sports and music. So like those types of, like, going to sporting events, going to music, going to concerts, and I don't I don't sit in the bad seats. That's where I'll spend money. So
Right.
because I appreciate that experience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. No, I really appreciate you being on the show today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Probably the easiest thing is email jason@larkcapital.com, or I'm on Instagram or LinkedIn. Instagram is @Lark Capital. LinkedIn is just Jason Balara. So anything, but email's the easiest, quickest way.
Yeah, and we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. So no worries if you didn't catch all of that. But no, Jason, really, man, I really appreciate it. Hope everybody got something from this episode. And I've got another one dropping here pretty soon. So keep listening. And remember, you don't have to quit your career to build a passive real estate portfolio that will provide you multiple streams of passive income. You just need to take some action, and listening to this podcast is an awesome first step. Jason, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Justin. It was awesome.
I hope you got value out of this episode of the Work Hard, Invest Harder podcast. Your one-stop shop for education on how you can continue to work hard in your career and have different options to invest even harder. If you took anything away from this episode, please leave a written review. I read every review as it helps me serve you better. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that you want to grow your passive real estate portfolio. The easiest way to do that is to join our investor club by heading to greatventurecapital.com/invest. The link is in the show notes. See you on the next episode.